It can be true from a certain point of view. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do mean to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Another fun fact, here we are for you to receive my thoughts on whether or not the narrative has been a little bit too Isagi focused. And by narrative, I literally mean specifically the U20 World Cup arc. We're going to have a whole other discussion about the other major arcs of the series, but as we are wrapping near the end of France, I've seen a really big discussion going around about whether or not the narrative is kind of like hopping on Isagi a little bit too much. But with that being the case, let me start this 15-minute timer and we will hop right into it. Let's find the timer. Come here. Yeah. Okay, so the narrative has been Isagi focused in an interesting way, I would say. Notably, I would like to compare specifically Isagi's relative focus in the Nigeria game versus the France game. Because notably, shockingly enough, it is the France game that has tripled down on this idea that the narrative is too heavily invested in Isagi. And here's the thing, I have a fundamental agreement already that I think the narrative is a little bit too heavily centered around him. Now, before all my fellow Isagi fans come trying to smite me, let me say something very, very clearly. I know Isagi is the main character. I know you build your narratives around main characters. That's kind of just how main charactering works. But the difference that a lot of people are, well, not even, I would say now, a thing that's been a part of bluelock in terms of like the one major flaw that if you think about it for even a little bit, you kind of notice, characters don't really have dynamics beyond Isagi. And if they do have dynamics beyond Isagi, they're very rarely fleshed out. For example, one of the major dynamics I would love to see more of that has been hinted at a whole lot and has been teased and tasted at and wiggled with is Baro and Shido. These are two very interesting characters for how well they fit into the bluelock philosophy, how well they are integrated into the overall narrative. Baro as an antagonist, Shido as an antagonist, and all them both as allies to our protagonists. But in spite of how interesting the dynamic could be if they actually explored it a bit more, it's not really there. It's existed for a while now, but it's not really there. Another major dynamic that, once again, sort of just gets danced around and not necessarily receiving the, I'd say, hefty amount of focus it probably should, is the dynamic between, if I can find it, there we go, the dynamic between Kurasu and Hiyori. Well, we've been getting more of it recently, and this is where I'm going to go into like the pseudo defense of like, it's not necessarily overly narrative focused, but I think now what we're seeing in terms of like the fandom reaction to narratives to focus on Isagi is probably like a dam breaking rather than a dam suddenly appearing and then breaking. Hiyori and Kurasu, two characters, really interesting dynamic. We know they have a history with each other. We've barely fleshed it out, other than, I guess, Hiyori inspired Kurasu, and Kurasu thinks Hiyori's really, really neat. That's kind of it. And that is that legacy issue, right? Where because the narrative is pretty heavily focused on Isagi, even when he's not there, he needs to be majorly mentioned. For anyone who remembers reading Bluelock episode Nagi, we literally had Nagi and Baro, two characters who had an interesting dynamic of their own, literally hallucinating a Phantom Isagi because he's that foundational to both of their characters. And once again, personally, I actually do like that. I think if you are going to write a main character, I do prefer when authors commit to the bit, right? Yeah, like they're the main character, thusly almost everything will be involved with them and or they will have their grubby little fingers in everything. However, I don't think that excuses underdeveloping the rest of the dynamics between the cast, right? Ultimately, I do think Bluelock would benefit a bit more from further narrative balancing. And by narrative balancing, I mean narrative weight balancing, right? Isagi is the main character, will obviously hold the most narrative weight. We will obviously get most time invested in him and his dynamics and how he feels. But at the same time, I think it's very, very important to balance your narrative around your central cast, or even just a broader cast in general. Narratives that do this really, really well, that I feel like should be well known at this point. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood does a fantastic job of doing its narrative balancing. Another series, I'd say a more recent series, that has a really good case of narrative. Is it really recent? It's been over for a while now. God of High School. But sorry, I glaze God of High School all the time. But essentially, narrative balancing is possible. It's real. It's there. And you can still definitely have a definitive main character, but you can still explore other dynamics, set them up, and have them fully developed and fleshed out. However, With all that being said, you may be like, okay, man, you must genuinely think that the narrative has been too focused on Isagi. Then, if you're talking about all this narrative balancing stuff and how this is the breaking of a dam that's been building up for over and over and over and over, not necessarily. And I think the France game is the reason for that. Here's the thing: if I were to make this video specifically right after the Nigeria game, I think I would 100% agree. Yeah, the U20 arc has been hopping a little bit too much on tip real quick. Like, I ain't gonna lie to you. The amount of glazing Isagi was receiving was, I mean, like, it makes sense. But man, my boy Bosher didn't get nothing, and he was basically, like, he was going crazy. So ultimately, it did really feel like the narrative was going a little bit too heavy-handed with Isagi. He was getting a little bit too much glaze, a little bit too much focus. And obviously, still, he's the main character. That's how it's supposed to go. But you know what's convinced me out of it? The same thing that has a lot of people super locked into the idea that Isagi's getting too much focus. I think the France game has done a fantastic job of narrative balancing around Isagi. Now, note how I say around him. He is still the main character quite definitively in the France game, right? He's done a whole net nothing this match until the latest 2 chapters, and within that, he's still been getting panel time, screen time. He's been talked down to a lot by the major antagonist of the game. Like, ultimately, he still is heavily involved, but what are we getting more of? We're getting more of those different dynamics. Otoya, Karasu, Hiyori, and Karasu. We got what most of their dynamic development happens in this game in terms of how they're working off each other and developing. Heck, even Hugo, well, not you, we'll talk about you in a sec, but even Hugo himself has gotten such a fantastic, meaty, hefty amount of narrative weight and has proven a genuine rival and superior to Isagi in not just idea. Well, I wouldn't say superior. Well, you know, that's my separate ideas on suitable destiny versus egoism. But regardless, in terms of the narrative and how the narrative is portraying it, Hugo has been presented as a genuine rival, if not superior to Isagi in egoism, egotistic. What's the word I'm looking for? Egotisticalness? I don't know. Essentially, sense of self, actual rivaling philosophy, and the ability to prove that philosophy. And Hugo's gotten all that in one game, right? Like, it's actually impressive how much time we've committed to Hugo and how well he's been balanced around as the man of the match, basically, for France, because it's not really close. Now, of course, I'm not going to say it's perfect. Far from it. But we got... Oh, Loki, you make me sad. But regardless, I'd say the narrative's actually been doing a really good job with that. And another case where I point out, like, okay, Isagi's definitely still the main character, but we're in a position where other characters are allowed to do things, is the France game still, because of how characters are being interacted around. Karasu being able to take on a counterbalancing lead role and fundamentally restructure bluelock to his will, even if this all ends up as what it will most likely end up as, right? A foundation for Isagi to step on to grow higher, as literally everything in the narrative is, this happened. Karasu went from a character who definitely did have narrative weight, but at most, I'd say he was like maybe a B tier, arguably C tier, especially considering how little he really got in the new Ignis League. Congratulations, you got Metavision in the last like 5 chapters of the match. Whoop-de-doo, like, you didn't do much. But now I'd say he's leveled all the way up to an A tier character in terms of narrative weight and narrative importance. He is the fundamental restructure, or is the foundation of the fundamental restructure that Bluelock is currently going through. This could not happen without Karasu. Another thing, Shido and Baro both have been allowed to, even if Shido wasn't allowed to score, Shido and Baro were given the ability to centralize the narrative around themselves. If not for that long, still enough that it was there. Another character who got, shockingly, if not much, a little bit of more screen time than I was expecting, Rensuke Kunigami got an entire chapter dedicated to his abilities and how he plays in and how ultimately he's foundational to the team as a whole. All of this ultimately ends up distributing that narrative weight out and not over centralizing. And very specifically, I think the thing that I really appreciate about the France match, and why I say because of it, I don't think the U20 arc is overly Isagi focused. I mean, like, maybe, I'm not sure even if he scores or assists or whatever, because the game isn't over yet at the time of recording. I still don't think I would say that it's too narrative focused on Isagi, because this match did allow Isagi to do genuinely nothing, right? As much as I was kind of deriding a certain Game for hopping all over Isagi's meat, right? Like they were doing a lot. They were doing a lot in Nigeria. Isagi still was that foundation, right? Like every single basis of interaction was fundamentally circled around him. He opened the game well. He finished the game well. Like this was a hard carry. I like that Isagi was basically useless for a majority of the match. That hasn't happened since what? Since Barcha, and even then that's quite well, no, I'd say Barcha. That's the last time Isagi's just been flat out useless, if not occasionally a net negative, right? And of course, Isagi's gonna get his lick back, his adaptation, his development, as main characters do. But even still, he was put into a narrative position that he wouldn't be allowed to if the narrative was truly over-centralized on him. And the reason I say that is because you'll notice other narratives that do have that really, really heavy over-centralized focus on one singular character. They will typically tend to struggle to put that character in a losing situation. And especially for this amount of time. Now, obviously, the France game is nowhere near the longest in the series, but for Isagi to be on the back foot and basically useless for as long as he has been, to the point where Ego himself is like, I'm not sure I'm really sure I want to build around you, buddy. I'm gonna just put you to the side a little bit, Karasu. I know I was just critiquing you in halftime, bro, but actually lock in with Otoy real quick. Like, ultimately, by allowing Isagi to be pressed down this low, you have proven, or at least kind of shows us it's proven to me specifically, that where there's a little bit more narrative flex than I would have initially thought there was. And notably, the thing I appreciate the most about all this is that not only is he being shown to not just be the most effective thing on the pitch, and ultimately is only getting some sort of effectiveness now towards the end of the game, which may not even work out. There's still, as much as me and many others are afraid of Isagi somehow scoring or assisting and this game being a tie, because we're all scared of that. We are all scared of that. The thing I will readily admit is that this is a rare case where the narrative and what it's saying about Isagi and what's actually happening in the narrative do genuinely line up perfectly. In a very similar way to Nigeria, but I'd say even better, because notably, everyone has been telling Isagi, yeah, bro, you're kind of not cooking right now, and he hasn't really been cooking. That's just a fact. He's having a pretty rough game, and of course, Hugo keeps touching him, but regardless, even with Hugo consistently touching him, doesn't change the fact that Isagi just hasn't really been cooking. Sure, he's unlocked autonomous Ultra Instinct again, but last 2 minutes of the match, maybe a minute left total, it's just too little too late. And with the idea that Isagi can be allowed to have too little too late, the idea that a character like Karasu can fundamentally take over Blue Lock right from Isagi, the idea that we can have a counter philosophy, and not just a counter philosophy that exists to be crushed, though I'm presuming that is the grander, longer term goal. Suitable Destiny exists to probably be proven wrong, or at least adapted into egoism further, so it just becomes another piece of egoism. But essentially, to have a whole character that hard shuts down our main character and then brings a comparable philosophy to said main character into Blue Lock itself, to the point where Blue Lock is actively restructuring around this new ideology, even with Ego himself conceding in certain shapes, ways, and forms, while Isagi has not done much of anything other than slowly realize that he may not even be that guy like that. That's very intriguing. It's an interesting way to keep the narrative technically centered around Isagi, but give other characters more narrative weight. It's a weird thing to do, right? Especially, I'm no professional writer, so take what I say with a massive bag of salt. But what I find, at least when I write, to struggle with, if I'm trying to flesh out the surrounding cast, but still have a focus on main or major characters, is that idea of, well, how do I keep this character involved if they aren't doing major narrative things? And Isagi being unable to do major narrative things is the focal point of the character right now. And of course, his evolution is further from that. So it's a great way that Kanashiro Sensei found to keep Isagi integrated, toes deep in the narrative, but not have him toes, knees, waist deep in the narrative and disrupting the water for everybody else. Karasu has gotten his due respect. Hugo's gotten his due dedication. Hiyori has been allowed to cook, even if he is more so like an appendage to Karasu. Kunigami got spotlight. Shido got spotlight. In glaze. A whole lot of Shido glaze this chapter and this arc. Not this chapter, but this arc. I don't know. Shido? I mean, he's like that, for real, for real. Borrow glaze. Everybody gets something, while Isagi gets basically nothing, but Isagi gets development as a part of everyone else developing around him, and that is beautiful. It's actually like an inversion of the narrative as it's been so far, where Isagi raises the play for everybody else. It's everybody else raising the play for Isagi, and that's why I ultimately think it's fine to be agreeing that bluelock has narrative balancing issues, or at least narrative weight balancing issues in terms of character structure. I think the France game actually does the opposite for me that it does for many others, and makes me believe that Kanesho Sensei is finally rebalancing around Isagi. But of course, we shall see if that remains to be true as things go on. But, oh, there we go. But, I'm out of time, so if you didn't always see in this video, please leave. Actually, I think that's a good one. Leave inversion in the comment section down below. But I thank you so much for watching. So leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure that little notification so you don't. Little what? Little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also even have a Patreon below, use more me for as low as $1, get them one a month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reactions, so this is to review, and reviews of all my videos, early ad free access, all my videos, early ad free access, not just all my videos on the main channel, but on the second channel that got the reaction. Links in the description down below, and in the card in the upper right hand corner. On top of that, I do have a link to my Twitch down below. I stream every Friday at 8 p.m. ES Tizzles, and I do have my Ko-Fi down below. Reach out 5 minutes for a short video or 20 minutes long video. If you ever want to know what a short video is, it's literally videos of this length where I just talk about a specific thing for about 15 minutes. But regardless, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Riddle 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, J2MA, Buddha Uda, Yuki Ally, Grim, Ollie, The Boy, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Tim Thomas, Kaving, OrXN, Dead Meme, Keon Stewart, Edwin Idwignoba, Straw, Antavius Mitchell, Superflame Zero, Weary Exile, Alex Kenny, Todd, The Practical One, Landon Clapwick, Heath Nelson, CAET, Plan Crone, Brandon Payne, Black Sage, Multi-Batman Superman, Zalims, Joe Bean, Sleepin' John, The Young Family Pastel Pandora, Mosity King DKG, Akolade Babatunde, Union Eye, Funny Dude, Athenzi Shear, Sino King, Sheesh King, CCC, Enzo, Kitty Liddy, Axis XC, RTM, Gangatron, Praise the Sun, Striker Man, Magic, Enzreen Bonnet, Scion, John Malcolm, Black Doctor Strange, and Donovan McIntosh. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our line art tier patrons: Dread Zoan, Kevin Encarnaus, Midnight Lord 21, and Sean. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our ink tier members: Shrimp the Fourth Shrimp 06. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier members: J Warrior and AZ Void. I'd like to give a final thank you to our colored art tier patrons: Walking Munoz and Walking Munoz.